Now, some of you are probably realizing that my mind works in strange and sometimes difficult ways. But somehow, as I was thinking about today, I asked the question, would Jesus be on Twitter? Well, my first response was no. But then as I began to think about it, he used the means that were available to him to convey the message that he had for the world. He was a great storyteller. And he told stories. We call them parables, but they were really stories. And if you've ever had to try to sit down and write a parable, you realize how difficult it is sometimes to tell a truth through a story. But Jesus told stories. So if Jesus was on Twitter, would you follow him? And that led me to ask, who are we following today? So guess what? I went to Google and hit Twitter and put followers. The number one follower on Twitter has 108,012,437 followers. Guesses. Nobody has a guess?
Santa Claus.
Huh? Katy Perry. Katy Perry. The second has 104,892,648 followers. You should get this one. Justin Bieber. I didn't make these up. These are as of Wednesday. These are accurate as of Wednesday. The third has 98,509,086 followers. Barack Obama. The fourth has 85,827,902 followers. Taylor Swift. And in case you're wondering, he didn't make the top 20. Does that say something about our society? I can't imagine 108 million people following him. But then I went to this story. The Magi, the wise men, the astronomers, following a star. And have you ever really thought about that? I mean, really thought about it. What type of a spectacular star would cause a group of foreigners to go and seek a king? And when do you follow a star? Day or night? Did they travel by night? How dangerous would it be to travel in a caravan, we presume, through uncharted territory in the dark of night, following the star? You couldn't see ahead of you. You couldn't see if someone was coming up from behind you. Or did they simply chart the course by night and then travel during the day? When did they sleep? It was a difficult journey. And then they reach their destination, and nobody knows anything about Earth. They go to Jerusalem. They go to the place of the king. And the king knows nothing about it. Would you begin to wonder about what you're doing? If all of a sudden when you reach the destination, nobody there knows anything about a king being born? Now, Herod's job is not secure. You know, he's a puppet king. Rome rules the land. He doesn't want to lose his power. It's amazing how when we get a hold of power, we don't want to give it up. In 2017, there were several countries that held elections, and the president or whatever he was refused to leave office, even though he was voted out of office. We don't want to lose power. And the king doesn't know about, he's in danger of losing his power. And you're there waiting. The king says, oh, we got to go search the scriptures. We got to find out what you're talking about. And now here you are, strangers in a foreign land, waiting for a king who has the authority of life and death over you. Preach on the back. To figure out where you're supposed to go next. But then it says the star returns and they fall. And they get to their destination. And there they find a poor carpenter, a young mother, and a baby. Did you ever think about that? The first people who heard the story were shepherds who were considered unclean. God has a sense of humor. The second people were Gentile foreigners from outside of Israel, coming and giving him expensive gifts and bowing down and worshiping him. And Israel puts out a decree to kill him. So Herod did. The ones who are supposed to be expecting the king, the ones who are supposed to be anticipating the king, know nothing about him. But unclean shepherds and foreign Gentiles bow and worship. Who are we following? Katy Perry, Justin Bieber, Barack Obama, Taylor Swift? The most recent star? The most recent fad? The most recent preacher on the scene? The answer may not be as easy as we want to think. False prophets have appeared for centuries. The church isn't very old, and Paul writes this to the church in Galatians. I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, and now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under offense. False prophets are already there. There are those who don't want anybody except Israel to be included in this newfound. Remember Peter's vision? Peter had to be challenged to go out into the world and go beyond the circle that he thought God had. In 1 Timothy 4:3, we read that there are those who have itching ears wanting to find someone who will say what they want them to say. This is the age in which we live, Paul writes to Timothy, that people are seeking to hear what they want to hear, not necessarily the truth. We want to keep power. We want to hold control. Do you know how fortunate we are to have the Bible in English? Filipino, Tagalog, Ilonggo, whatever. Do you realize that men and women were killed because they sought to translate the Bible into the language of the people because the leaders, i.e. the church, didn't want the people to know what it said? Because if they know what it said, they lose their power. Think about it. They didn't want you and I to know what the Word really said. I have a friend, Doug Stewart. He's an Old Testament scholar and worked on the first, or the second and third versions of the NIV, helping translate into what we now have. He says that as he reads the King James Version, he can tell which school did the translation. Some were scholars from Oxford, some were scholars from Cambridge, and he says simply by reading it, you can tell which school they came from. By the language they used, and by the theologies that they put in. You know, we have our biases. Some of those words are difficult at best. Some of the words that they really struggle with. You talk to any translator trying to put the Bible into another language, and how difficult it is to find some words. A dear friend of ours, Filipina, Carla Mega, can't remember her married name now. She taught Greek in Central Philippine University. And she got her students to translate the words into Ilonggo, which was, the language of Tanai, where she taught. Not from English, but from the actual Greek. And she said there were some days when we would spend a whole class trying to figure out the meaning of one word, Ilonggo. How do we translate it so that it makes sense to the people who are going to read it? We often want to find what we want to believe. We don't want our thinking challenged. Doug has written a wonderful book. If you haven't got this book, you need to get it. It's still in print. I checked this morning. Gordon Fee and Doug Stewart, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. They tell you how to read the Bible, how to read some of the Old Testament passages, how to read the wisdom literature, how to read the Psalms, to make them come alive in today's language. Still in print. Amazon, $15.95. Or you need a used copy for $3.95. You need it. Because you see, we need to know the Word. As we follow, we need to know what we're following. My prayer as we enter 2018 is that we spend time in Scripture. We spend time looking at the old stories and seeing how they apply to us. And make sure what we hear is what they say. Don't believe everything I say. Did a Bible study a few years ago, and I gave out a false statement that I knew was false. And about a year later, one of the women in the group says, for the past year, I've been looking, and I can't find what you said. And that's good, because it's not there. But you were the only one out of this group of 18 who even thought to question what I said. God gave us a brain. Just because somebody wrote it in a book doesn't mean that's the way it actually really is. may be right, they may be wrong, they may be somewhere in the middle. Remember, we need to handle the word carefully. We need understanding in our culture. One of the things I'm working on now is that it looks like I'm going to go with Diane in July, August to Kuala Lumpur, along with Paul Aida and a couple other pastors, and while they're teaching teachers, we're going to be dealing with pastors. But we're working with how do we put what we need to say into the context of where they are, in a refugee camp. We're going to be dealing with pastors working with refugees. How do we contextualize the gospel to what's happening in a refugee camp in 2018? What we do here isn't going to work there. But the truth is the same. God so loved whose star are we called? Sure. Open our eyes. We want to see Jesus. Open our ears. Open our hearts. In Christ's name.